Hi, this is Eternal King, bringing another discussion video today. So I want to talk a little bit about metastats, now that they've kind of evened out for both formats. So starting with Annie, Annie has dropped to sub 50% for the first time ever since this card has existed. So we talk about Jin Annie kind of being one of the best aggro decks in the game. She has been for multiple seasons. She's currently at 48%. The OG turn 1 advantage champion, where, you play her turn 1, she gets a free swing, she turbo levels, you get Tibbers, Disintegration as her champ spell, and he's not good enough anymore. The OG turn 1 advantage card. I don't think she's good enough in Standard, and she's not good enough in Eternal. She's sitting at like 49%. Talking a little bit more about some of, what's good in Eternal, it is the Akshan Samara. Absolutely nothing's changed there. Nora sitting at like 38%. Nora's not good enough. So increasingly we're starting to see both Standard and Eternal limit in terms of its dimension and how complicated it is. Those infinite cycle invoke decks we've seen, they're gone. It is just the Akshan Samara that's left in that format. And Fiora is kind of coming in as the new counter to the infinite cycle type of deck, because she's just OTKs through the Samara and the Akshan and wins that way. And so she's at like 58% just because she counters the deck that beats everything else. Never, you don't really want there to ever be a time when Fiora is the best card in Eternal or any format. That's not fun. No one likes that. It's not interesting. Back to Standard. Just kind of talking about what's really good there. So, Eternal is the 2-mana cyclers and the thing that counters the 2-mana cyclers. And then Standard is the turn 1 advantage. The Annie, the Teemo, and the Nora, they're not good enough for turn 1 advantage. So we have to talk about what is good, and that's Lurk. So Lurk is the free wins deck that can't be stopped currently. It's like 56, 58%. It is the best deck in the game, and it is just a turn 1 advantage deck that can't, gets free wins. And consistently that's too strong. So we'll talk a little bit about Lurk. And again, there's not too much to say because the deck is so uninteresting. But like we're talking about cards that are emblematic of LOR right now. And I think that's a good discussion to have. It is the Hatchling, right? 1 mana, gets a free swing, can't be blocked, and then scales infinitely. So LOR is the Hatchling in Standard right now, and it is the proliferating Dark Wraith. The two problematic. The Dark Wraith isn't problematic on paper, but it is emblematic in terms of what's happening with the game right now, which is just turn 1 advantage, infinite scaling cards. So yeah, it's the Hatchling and it's the Dark Wraith. That's Standard right now. In terms of cards that are emblematic of what's good, which is not low synergy, but at least low intrigue. Unga Bunga. I have the attack token. It's turn 1. I do my thing, and then now the game's over. I want to talk a little bit about some of the stats of kind of really worrisome trends for both formats, and it is going to give you a sense of what's happening to the game, and it's kind of like a warning sign. So, big red flag. Nora's down to 38%. Nora has consistently been a 50% champion, board vomit, infinite value, does what she does well, 50% card. She hasn't been nerfed, nothing's been changed about her. She shouldn't be worse in the game, but for whatever reason, she is not fast enough for the current state of LOR, where it is the 2-mana Samara Challenger, and it is the 1-mana Lurk. She is now at 38%. She's not good enough. So that's a big red flag. Another big red flag that I see, and you're going to laugh at this one, but it is fairly important to talk about, and it is Vladimir. So traditionally when a card gets buffed, it does better in terms of statistics. He got a really cool new effect called Crimson Pack. So he literally is a on-curve removal effect on a champion body. He used to be a sub 50% card, 48%, that sort of thing. With the recent changes to the game, he is now 38%. He has dropped 10% in win rate after buffs. That's insane, and I think that's a big red flag in terms of the direction the game's heading. Obviously, Swain isn't playable anymore either post nerfs, which again is a shame because Swain's an interesting card. But I really want to focus on Vladimir and just say, like, he was massively buffed, and despite being massively buffed, he dropped 10% in terms of win rate. That's not good. That's not something you want to see. You don't want to see mid-range get absolutely gutted like that. And it is. It is the Hatchling. It is the Dark Wraith. It is, again, it is the Annie not being good enough because there's too much synergy. It is the Samaras, that sort of thing. So the game is kind of gone from these kind of, I would call it a build around quest format. LOR is the questing card game. You have this text on every single champion in the game that tells you how to build your deck. And it also implies that when you meet this level up requirement, that you have a high chance to win the game. And increasingly what we're seeing is that these texts don't matter. They don't matter for any single card in the game. Don't, build for the quest. Don't build for the champion. Don't fulfill these, deck building requirements or these synergy requirements. Just play Samara in Eternal and just play Lurk in Standard. Play the turn 1 advantage or play the 2 mana cycler. Or, maybe you have a little bit of infinite scaling in there as well. We've talked about why that's bad. Dark Wraith is kind of emblematic of that. It is emblematic of the infinite scaling deck. But also Timelines, is also emblematic of that. And Timelines is never going to be bad because it's just infinite scaling on a 2 mana spell. So, we can talk a little bit about streamers leaving the game. And the streamers that have stayed. So Mogwai left. He found the game kind of boring. He thought that the direction things were heading was uninteresting. Obviously, we split to a 2-format game, and that breathed a little new life in. But now that we have these 2 formats very well established, where it is the turn 1 advantage or it is the 2 mana cycler for each format respectively, that leaves there's no room for deck techs or interesting deck discussions because it is just 2 things, each format being its own thing. It is the Samara. It is the Lurk. Those are the 2 decks in the game. They exist in their respective formats. And then otherwise, Grappler left as well. And, Grappler loved his kind of big mana combo decks. He loved his Karma, right? And so Karma's terrible. Karma, says that I can do stuff when I hit 10 mana. And why would you ever want to do stuff when you hit 10 mana? When you can do stuff on turn 2 and you can do stuff on turn 1 in terms of Lurk. You can scale infinitely. You can cycle infinitely. You can challenge infinitely off 1 and 2 mana. Why would you ever want to play for Karma? That's too interesting. That's too quest oriented. It's too high commitment. Never do that. And that sucks because, again, I've always said that the more that LOR gets like Hearthstone in terms of how it plays and the way that the decks are built, the less interesting it is. And the further we get away from MTG, which was the kind of original inspiration from the game, plus a little bit of Gwent in there, the further we get away from Gwent and MTG and the closer we get to Hearthstone, the worse the game is for it. And we're very much there now. Lurk is top tier, Samara's top tier, nothing else matters. So this is Eternal King signing out, but I will say that this is the worst that LOR has ever been. I'm not saying that the devs can't fix it, but by filing down and kind of reducing the importance of these questing conditions for every single champion in the game, they've made the game worse. When Ezreal became unplayable, when Master Yi became unplayable, when everything just became Rek'Sai in Standard, when Eloy became unplayable, when Jhin, even Jhin, kind of the OG card of, simplicity. Jhin used to be the face of simple LOR, and Jhin isn't good enough anymore. Nora used to be kind of the board vomit card. Nora's not good enough anymore. These are now, Jhin is sub 50%. Nora's, sub 40%. That's really bad. So, Evelyn, is the same thing. Evelyn's not good enough. Evelyn, tries to do something and the game's moving away from that. I'd like to see it move back. Definitely would. I would like to stop seeing Lurk be top tier. I'd like to stop seeing Samara top tier. I'd like to see every other card in the game be playable, and I'd like to see this text matter, and I'd like to see the flips happen and that sort of thing. Because the game's better off for it. It's more dynamic. It's more interesting. It's more involved. Yeah, it's more exciting for sure. To not just be like, okay, I know exactly what card I should play turn one. In the case of Lurk, I know I play my 1-mana Lurk, and I know that I want to have the attack token. In the case of Samara, you want to have the attack token, and you want to bank the mana 1 and then play Samara turn 2. So like you like it's so one-dimensional in terms of what you're doing. We want to move away from that if we can. This is Eternal King signing out.